Here we are 1 week away from NFL football games, and I am so freaking excited. I'm going to give you a bigger breakdown of my wide receiver rankings. We're going top 40 today for the wide receiver rankings for 2025. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are as excited about the season as I am. So getting into our first tier right here, I will go through these first two guys briefly because nothing has changed. Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb are still at 1 and 2. Jamar Chase just has that number one ceiling. I could see him doing it all over again. We know nothing has changed about the situation in Cincinnati. With CeeDee Lamb, the only concern I've brought up all offseason is this Dak and Brian Schottenheimer dynamic. But at the end of the day, this team has no running game. Their defense, to me, is a question mark. I can see them throwing 40 times a game, several games during the season. I think CeeDee Lamb is going to get targeted like crazy. And if Jamar's not the number one, I think it's CeeDee Lamb. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown still over Justin Jefferson, and it has irked people for weeks now because I made the switch after Justin Jefferson's injury. And listen, it's really not a Justin Jefferson issue. It's always been a J.J. McCarthy issue. But with Amon-Ra St. Brown, I know the quarterback is good with Jared Goff. I know that this offense will view him as the main target, not Jameson Williams. And I know that this offensive coordinator can't maximize every offensive weapon like Ben Johnson did. So it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta as far as importance to this offense because John Morton just can't maximize all those players like Ben Johnson did. Therefore, Amon-Ra St. Brown gets a bunch of targets this year. And with Justin Jefferson, like I said, it's not a player issue. I love JJ. I think that where you're getting him in drafts is fine. I would pick CeeDee over him, but I think after CeeDee Lamb, it's fair game. If you want to choose Justin Jefferson, go ahead. Because Amon-Ra St. Brown is ranked way behind him in ADP everywhere you go. But Justin Jefferson, it doesn't change the fact that even with the healthy JJ, I've got concerns with JJ McCarthy. And that's the bottom line. With Puka Nacua, I've got concerns with Stafford. Obviously, the Stafford back injury looks good today, but we don't know what tomorrow holds. We don't know what next week holds. I mean, this guy has been in and out of the practice lineup for basically all of the offseason. So with Puka, as long as Stafford's healthy, I know he will dominate. I would prefer to rank him over Justin Jefferson personally, but I can't do that with this Matt Stafford uncertainty. And then I've got Nico Collins at 6 and Malik Nabers to round us out in this tier at 7. With Nico, I just trust him a little bit more than Malik, and it's actually kind of rich to say that because Malik Nabers has been, a lot of injuries have occurred, obviously, but Nico Collins hasn't finished a full season these last 2 years. So I don't think that Nico Collins is all of a sudden going to get 17 games. But I will say this, going into the season with an injury like Malik Nabers is, puts you at a disadvantage in my rankings. I don't like that. And on top of that, this quarterback situation, I'm still not really dialed in on as far as being super excited about this quarterback situation. With Nico, I know he's got a really good quarterback with CJ. With Malik Nabers, it's an extreme talent, but he's got a quarterback I don't trust. So that's the reason why Nico is ahead of Malik Nabers at 6. Dropping down to our next tier, Brian Thomas Jr. and Drake London still in the same order here as well. I love Brian Thomas Jr. Wish I could put him higher, but they have Travis Hunter who will get 100-plus targets, in my opinion. Now, again, I've always said this, it will not affect Brian Thomas Jr.'s bottom line, which I think is very similar to what it was last year. But I don't see him getting a ton more targets than he did last year because of Travis Hunter. I think that the targets that have departed, a lot of them go to Travis Hunter. So I think that Brian Thomas Jr., there's just a cap on his ceiling because of Travis Hunter. And then Drake London at 9. That's the opposite situation. I believe that he will be the number one by far in this offense, particularly as long as Darnell Mooney's not even around. They don't have a real number 2. But the bottom line is that Drake London, I don't trust as a talent quite as much as I trust Brian Thomas Jr. But I do still think that Drake London is a really good pick in fantasy drafts, particularly where you're getting him in fantasy drafts. I think is a very strong move. But I do think Drake London ultimately will be held back a little bit just because of the rush first offense I think this team will be pursuing in 2025. Jackson Smith-Njigba leaped up over A.J. Brown in my latest rankings, and I briefly explained this, and the reason why is because A.J. Brown, we really don't know if this guy is going to play week 1 or not. I mean, we are 1 week away from the Philadelphia and Dallas Cowboys Thursday night game to open the NFL season, and we don't know if A.J. Brown is playing in that game. And I've said this a lot too. The guy has been unhappy with the team for a long time now. So I don't know if it's only the injury that's factoring into this missing practice time or if it's other than that, a contract issue. I don't know the whole situation, but it took a lot for me to move Jackson Smith-Njigba over AJ because I know that AJ's got more upside when he's actually on the field. He can give you 30, 35-point games still. That's a fact. JSN probably won't give you that maybe once a year, though. So I think Jackson Smith-Njigba, the reason he shot up is because there's no other concerns. And I know that he's the number 1 target in Seattle, and he'll get targeted like crazy because they legitimately don't have a solid wide receiver, too. If you think Cooper Kupp is a solid number 2 wide receiver at this point, you need to get your head checked because the guy is way past his prime. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got T. Higgins at 12 and Ladd at 13. T. Higgins, this is a business decision. I've just had to make this one because I just have issues with Ladd. I've got issues with Mike, Marvin, all those guys behind him. I've got issues with him. But with T. Higgins, I don't have issues as far as best ball play. I think he's a great best ball wide receiver. I've never been big on the price this year you have to pay for him. I like his price last year a lot better. This year, you have to get him at the round 2 to 3 turn, basically. And I think that's an overprice for a wide receiver 2 on his own team. Because T. Higgins will give you disappearing acts like he always has. So make sure to expect that because you will get that if you draft him in a redraft league. Now, Ladd McConkey at the 13 spot, there's no question to me that Keenan Allen won't be the number 1. Like, Ladd is the more talented player. He's the superior player at this point in both of their careers. But there is also no question that Keenan Allen has a great deal of chemistry baked in with Justin Herbert before Ladd got to Los Angeles. So that is a factor. I think a lot of third downs where Justin Herbert's in trouble, Keenan Allen could be that guy. But as far as getting scores and getting in the end zone, Ladd will do that more than Keenan. So I think Ladd overall still has a good deal of upside. I just think that this is kind of close to his ceiling at number 13. Mike Evans actually rose up for me to 14 over Marvin at 15. Now, the reason I did that is because I know that with Marvin, there's a lot of concerns I've had all offseason, and he's kind of been a placeholder at 14 because I didn't trust anyone behind him. With Mike, I still have issues with the age, but I have always said this. If Mike is ending up as good as he was last year, I had him way underranked. I was just not comfortable moving him much higher. Now I'm more comfortable because this team has a lot of injuries they're dealing with. I mean, not only with Jalen McMillan, who will miss half the season, Chris Godwin, who will miss the start of the season, but now Cade Otton, a tight end, he's going to be out for an extended period of time as well because of a leg injury. This team has Mike Evans and Emeka Ebuka. That's the bottom line. That's all they've got. So to me, I think Mike Evans, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be a top 10 guy for sure. The only reason he's still back here at 14 is because of the age concern, and it is valid, by the way. Marvin Harrison Jr. at 15. I'm so torn about this one, man. Because on one hand, I see the surge, right? I trust the talent. I believe in the talent taking a leap in his second year. But on the other hand, I did not see any compelling evidence that this offense is going to take strides as far as getting him the ball in 2025 in different ways that they did in 2024. I just don't trust this offensive system. I think that Marvin is being kind of screwed a little bit. And Kyler Murray's history with wide receiver ones in his own offense don't typically add up to great fantasy success. So I could see Marvin being anywhere from top 10 to top 30. And that is not comfortable for me to rank him much higher than this. Again, he was at 14 for a while because he was more of a placeholder. But now I've got Mike over him at 14 and Marvin at 15. Jalen Waddle and Garrett Wilson round out this tier. Now, I ended up moving Jalen Waddle over Garrett Wilson because I'm just getting more and more bought in on this one. And to be clear, if you are not familiar with the channel until this video, I have had Jalen Waddle ranked above consensus all off season long. I do not like Tyreek Hill. I'm out on him. You'll notice you haven't seen him in the rankings yet. And Jalen Waddle is my guy. I have drafted a ton of him in underdog best ball drafts because I believe that by October, I think he'll be the wide receiver one on this team. I think there's so much lack of trust with Tyreek, and simultaneously Waddle's had a good offseason. And we've seen him realistically in a number one role back before Mike McDaniel got there. So I don't want to hear the talk of like, is he a real number one? He showed you in his rookie year he could handle a bunch of targets. So I think Jalen Waddle gets closer to that. And realistically, if Jalen Waddle is the number one, I think I've got him ranked too low, to be honest with you. Garrett Wilson is 17. I had to move him down because I can't get over this quarterback situation. I mean, it's just the story of his career, right? Like, it just hasn't gotten any better. Justin Fields is a downgrade from Rodgers throwing the ball, and I just don't see much success from Garrett Wilson on a per-game basis unless he gets in the end zone, which I think will be few and far between because Justin Fields just doesn't have that great of a throwing arm. And that's just the bottom line. So Garrett Wilson, I know he's going to get peppered with targets. I know that he'll be a fine PPR play, but for where I'm drafting him at, like, I just am not big on this one. Garrett Wilson, I just find ways to move him back down. Dropping down to our next tier, Xavier Worthy moved up, and Terry McLaurin is still down here at 19. Now, with Xavier Worthy, he moved up because of the Rashee Rice suspension. And Rashee Rice, if you have not heard, I'm shocked you haven't heard it if you haven't, but Rashee Rice accepted a 6-game suspension, so I was wrong. I predicted 4 games, he got 6. Xavier Worthy, to me, will be a top 10 wide receiver through the month of September. And I also believe that when Rashee comes back, Xavier Worthy will still be a really good wide receiver in fantasy. I think that he will develop his role on this offense with Rashee Rice there. So Xavier Worthy, to me, I'm ready to commit to the guy. Like, I have no reservations picking him in a redraft league, let alone a best ball league. And Terry McLaurin, I get it. He signed the contract. It doesn't change the fact that he missed a lot of practice time during the training camp portion of the offseason. And that's a problem for me because the guy is 30 years old. He did not get his body ready, and I'm worried about him come early season. I'm worried of a soft tissue injury like a pulled groin, a pulled hamstring, whatever the case may be. I'm worried about it. So I've got him at 19 while acknowledging that he does have a great quarterback and he could easily be a better target than Garrett Wilson at 17. I think that he just needs to show me that he can play at the highest level like he did last year after he didn't practice at all this offseason. But good for him getting the money. Devontae Adams at 20, Zay Flowers at 21. With Devontae, I have expressed recently on a video that I have had more distrust in Devontae than I have let on this whole offseason. And that's my fault. I try to strive for transparency. Devontae, I don't feel like I was as transparent on. I still like him. I still think he'll be a really good red zone threat particularly. But with the Matt Stafford injury and with this guy being basically at that age cliff for wide receivers historically, I just have a lack of trust in Devontae. I really don't like picking him in redraft leagues. I like taking him in a best ball league sometimes, but I really have issues with Devontae Adams. And I like him at 20 again because I think he's a red zone threat, if nothing else. But I don't see him being a guy who gets a 1,100-yard season, to be honest with you. I really don't. I think Puka dominates, and I think Devontae's one of the stronger number 2s in the league if the age doesn't catch up with him. Now, Zay Flowers at 21. Again, I've had him always consistently over consensus during the offseason because of certain things. He fits a lot of breakout metrics for me at the wide receiver position. The contract year upside with this player, I think is very, very noteworthy. And I do think it's also noteworthy that this offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, has discussed all offseason about getting this guy the ball more. That's not a secret, guys. He has made that clear that he wants to get Zay the ball more. I just think Zay Flowers, if he can get more touchdowns this year, and I think they will try to do that for him, he'll come out and be a better fantasy pick than where you drafted him at. And I think he will return value this year, and I've got him at 21. Tet McMillan at 22 and Courtland Sutton at 23 to round out this tier. With Tet, I have gotten more in on him over time just because I think that he looked better in the preseason than I thought he would be. I was never big on the prospect, Tet McMillan, but after watching him in the preseason, I kind of got more into the idea of taking him. Now, I still do think that Jalen Coker is a really big sleeper in that offense, and I've drafted a ton of Jalen Coker on best ball. But I think Tet McMillan definitely will be the number 1 wide receiver as long as he's healthy. And I think that he looked good enough with Bryce Young to be a top 20 guy. But I also don't think that Bryce Young is good enough to supply a superior wide receiver 1 in fantasy. And then Sutton to round us out at 23. Honestly, he might be too low. Like, Sutton at this ranking could be very, very floor level because this guy will be the number 1. They just signed him to a new deal. They want him in their plans, and Bo Nix really likes him, and I expect Bo Nix to take a leap. I mean, it's very, very, very simple. I think that he'll be the primary red zone threat once again in this offense with a great offense behind him. I think that Denver is in a really good spot this year, largely because Courtland Sutton has been a very consistent red zone threat, and I think he'll continue to be that. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got Travis Hunter at 24 and Deebo Samuel at 25. Now, Travis Hunter, I've got him ranked over consensus basically all offseason as well. Again, it wasn't very cool to acknowledge that Travis Hunter would be taking targets away from Brian Thomas Jr. early in the offseason. Now people understand that. Like, he will be a very heavily targeted guy in this offense because when push comes to shove, they drafted him to be a wide receiver. And again, I'm not debating that he will get cornerback snaps, but I am saying that when push comes to shove and they need him on one side of the ball, he will be a wide receiver first. And I think that he's such a dominant talent that when those moments come, he could be a 10-plus touchdown guy this year. But I also think that he will disappear for you in certain games this year. So you need to balance this one correctly. Better best ball pick, but I'm still willing to take him because of those explosion games in redraft leagues as well. Deebo Samuel, I'm just in on him. Like, this shouldn't come as a surprise to people who've been following the channel all offseason. But for new people, Deebo's also been someone I'm over consensus on. I think Deebo Samuel is going to be good this year. And I think this could be really low for his ranking come December. But what we're at right now, you can't debate the metrics are so against him. From last year, he looked horrific. I mean, every indication would be that he declined as a player. But I look at the new situation with a great offensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury. In this new environment, he's seeking a contract. He wants more money on a contract year. I like the path here for a Deebo Samuel return to be a great finish at the wide receiver position. I honestly think if he hits like I think, this is way too low for Deebo Samuel. DJ Moore at 26 and Devonta Smith at 27. DJ Moore, you're going to see really quick, like, how close my ranking of Rome is behind DJ Moore. Like, I really kind of wonder if there's much of a teardrop between him and Rome Odunze. And I do think that DJ Moore is the better wide receiver. I do think that he's the primary number one. But I've highlighted this all offseason too. Caleb Williams' history with wide receiver ones on his own team, they don't typically amount to much. Caleb is a spread the ball around type of guy. And Ben Johnson, at coordinator, is not exactly known for having dominant number ones. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown was a dominant number one in Detroit, but he does like to spread the ball around too. So I think DJ Moore's ceiling is still capped because he's got Caleb as his quarterback and he's got Ben Johnson as his OC. Now, with Devonta Smith at 27 to round out this tier, I think Devonta Smith had to move up because I kept saying to myself over the offseason, Jalen Hurts will throw the ball more. And if that happens, that means that the wide receivers had to move up too. And I had Devonta Smith ranked too low all offseason up to this point. And even still, this might be a little low. Because if A.J. Brown doesn't play, and if he misses time, and if he's grumpy all season, Devonta Smith could be the wide receiver one way more than you think. And all we know is that Devonta Smith is very good. He's a very good number two, and I think he has a lot of potential to be a number one. But as long as AJ's there, it does lower his upside. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got Khalil Shakir still at 28 and DK Metcalf at 29. Khalil Shakir continues to be well above consensus in my rankings. So one thing you know for sure, coming here, you're not going to get copy and paste rankings from other fantasy creators. I do my own thing. I move my own way. And all I've said this offseason is Khalil Shakir will be the number one wide receiver in Buffalo. And you want a wide receiver attached to Josh Allen. Now, last year, Josh Allen threw a lot less passes than he typically does on a yearly basis. I believe we increased that passing attempt number by at least 50 to 70 passes. And guess who benefits from the majority of those? Khalil Shakir, because they didn't add anyone this offseason. All they're doing is banking on a breakout from Keon Coleman or Dalton Kincaid or both. Well, guess what happens when those don't happen? Khalil Shakir's there. On a new deal, they trust the guy. They trust the player to get 100-plus targets. I see a lot of good stuff for Khalil Shakir to break out again. And I think DK Metcalf at 29, I've raised concerns about this one. DK Metcalf is in an offense with a quarterback who can't move anymore. They have a bad offensive line, and there's going to be a lot of go balls that head his way. Well, DK Metcalf is going to get triple covered, double covered quite a bit. in this 2025 season. And guess what you have to do when you get double and triple covered? You got to get a lot of contested catches to come down with. Now, George Pickens, ironically, is a really good contested catch player. DK Metcalf is one of the worst as far as wide receiver ones in the league. 19.2% contested catch rate in 2024 put him at 100th for qualifying wide receivers. I just see a lot of schematic issues and some dysfunction in this offense as normal because the Steelers can't get offense right ever. But I do think that DK Metcalf has to be inside the top 30 because he will get peppered with targets, similar to a Garrett Wilson, but he's not as good of a player. Jamison Williams at 30, and Tyreek finally makes it at 31. Jamison Williams will be a better fantasy player than Tyreek. It will happen. Jamison Williams, I have said, this Detroit offense makes me shaky about the potential of a wide receiver 2 in Detroit because I still do think it will be the big 3 in the offense. I think Jamison Williams is on the outside looking into Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sam Laporta. But I still do think he's explosive enough to give you enough big games to where he does have a top 30 finish. And then with Tyreek Hill, obviously I don't think that he's going to be the worst player in fantasy football in 2025. Grow up. Everybody needs to understand I hate the value you're getting him at. And a lot of people view it as a good value. It's not. This guy would be breaking history if he has another top 12 season, which is where you're drafting him at. So this one, I think, just sucks. I think Tyreek Hill, there's so much negativity around him all offseason. If it's not injuries, it's locker room issues. With Tua, his own quarterback doesn't trust the guy. Tyreek Hill, there's just way too much negativity around this situation for me to put him anywhere higher than this. And by the way, we still don't know if he's going to play week 1. He's injured right now. Tyreek Hill is not a good pick this year. And I do feel the same way about Pickens. I really do. Like Pickens, I get it. The situation should indicate that he should be a really good wide receiver. But George Pickens, to me, just as a player, if you look at the history of Steelers wide receivers when they leave Pittsburgh, it's all gross. And by the way, Pickens is not the most talented wide receiver to leave Pittsburgh. That was Antonio Brown. Now, you could argue to me, George Pickens isn't the head case Antonio Brown was. And I would listen to you, but I would also acknowledge he is a head case. So I think that this is a contract year for a player who wants the ball and he won't get it as much as he wants. How long does it take for George Pickens to implode over in Dallas? Are you acting like you didn't see him implode in Pittsburgh? Because it happened several years straight. So I think this one has a lot of ability to implode, but I do think if he can keep his head on straight, it could be really good for him. But I've got him here at 32 because history indicates it won't go good. Rome Odunze is at 33. To round out this tier, again, if you recall, DJ Moore is at 26. I think the gap between these two guys is pretty small. Like Rome Odunze, realistically, is in a tier below DJ Moore. Don't just look at 7-spot difference. I think Rome Odunze could be the wide receiver 1 on this team. I think it's very possible. If you just kind of look at how the preseason went, Caleb Williams definitely favored Rome Odunze on several routes as opposed to DJ Moore. DJ Moore is still being kind of used as like this wide receiver screen type of X, whereas Rome Odunze gets a lot of downfield work. So I think Rome Odunze, if things work out for Caleb, and if DJ Moore just is that same player as he was last year, Rome Odunze could easily finish as the better wide receiver in Chicago and in fantasy in 2025. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got Emeka Ebuka at 34 and Rashee Rice at 35. Now, here with Emeka Ebuka, before I do this Rashee Rice diatribe, I think Emeka Ebuka is a great player. I do think that this could be a lower end ranking for him. I still do think that Mike Evans could be the guy that just not disappears, but could get screwed over by his age. And in that case, Emeka Ebuka would rise. But I think for the time being, Emeka Ebuka probably is a 6 to 7 target a game type of guy, which I do think is fine. But with Emeka Ebuka, I do also think that you need to be a little cautious about where he's going in drafts. He's getting shot up draft boards right now. There will be a ceiling we reach, and we're not there yet, but I do think we're getting sort of close to it because Emeka Ebuka still is a player that's on an offense where I think they will prefer Mike Evans consistently over Emeka Ebuka. But make no mistake about this. I love Emeka Ebuka. I think he's going to be a really good player in 2025 fantasy football. And again, this could be a low ranking for him. Rashee Rice at 35. Obviously, 6-game suspension. Again, I was wrong. I predicted 4. He accepted 6 games. So he will miss the month of September and the early part of October. This is not good. So obviously you need to know where I view Rashee Rice being ranked is ahead of Calvin Ridley, Ricky Pearsall. I would still prefer Rashee Rice over those guys because I know that when he comes back, he will be a really, really good threat. I actually like this better than him getting suspended midseason because by that time he would have been in a rhythm, had it interrupted by a suspension, and then come back and try to be the same guy. I think that starting out the year like this, he can just focus on keeping his body healthy, focus on maintaining good relationships with the team, and when he comes back, he can fit in seamlessly. Because there's no question he's their wide receiver one when everything is all together. Rashee Rice, when he comes back, I think it's worth it to have him ranked over Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, I get it. People are really in on Calvin Ridley at his cost this year. I'm just not. Like, the history of rookie quarterbacks with wide receivers is so bad. And people just want to look back to Terry McLaurin last year with Jaden Daniels. That's all I hear. I also hear CJ Stroud with Nico Collins. Listen, the bottom line is, guys, Cam Ward is not either of those guys. I'm sorry. If nothing else, he's got way too much working against him. This offensive line still isn't good, and he's not getting rid of the ball fast enough. So I think Cam Ward will have growing pains, and I think Calvin Ridley will fit the prototypical wide receiver with a rookie quarterback, which is basically around a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 finish. Now, Ricky Pearsall is at 37, and I do think that Ricky Pearsall is in a situation where he could be too low ranked, but I also still struggle to trust the San Francisco group for some reason. Not that I don't think Brock Purdy's good. I actually do. But Ricky Pearsall is in an offense with Jawan Jennings, who is a little questionable right now because of the contract and because of injuries. But I just don't have as much trust in Ricky as I do with Rashee Rice. Again, that's kind of the marker right there, is guys that I would take under Rashee Rice are guys I still have too much uncertainty on. I know that Rashee Rice comes back and he's great. Ricky Pearsall, we saw flashes of it. We still don't know if the guy's that good. So Ricky, I think, could be a good value, but I think also could end up just being a bust in fantasy because we just don't know enough about Ricky Pearsall yet. Matthew Golden, though, at 38, I am rising on him, and Josh Downs is at 39. Now, Matthew Golden, again, I've been rising on him basically the last month. Like, Jaden Reed, this injury has me concerned. They did draft him in the first round, and I do think Jordan Love is a better quarterback than a lot of people think. So Matthew Golden, if he is the wide receiver 1 all season, could be a legitimate guy that could be a top 20 player. Now, I also think that this room is so crowded, so I do think that lowers his upside because I do think that they will use Romeo Doubs at the goal line. I do think that when Jaden Reed's healthy, he will get a lot of the gadget type of plays to make Matthew Golden a little bit cornered in this spot where he's going to be this possession receiver type of guy. I do think he has a lot of upside. I love the offense in Green Bay. I just still think I'm a little bit reluctant to put him much higher than this. Now, with Josh Downs at 39, this is a player I've said all offseason as well, I think has another breakout type of season. But I have gotten lower on him. And it's not because I don't think they made the right move with Daniel Jones. I do. I think it's good for Josh Downs in particular. But I will say Josh Downs is in a spot where I don't love the offense. I think Tyler Warren will be really good. And I do think Pittman will play a part. But with Josh Downs, I think he's just better than Pittman. I think he's going to get enough targets in the middle of the field. And I think I've always compared him to Wan'Dale Robinson, just a much better version and a much better athlete. Wan'Dale Robinson got 140 targets last year for the Giants. Now, I don't necessarily think Downs gets that. I do think that he gets over 110, though, and I think that Josh Downs is good enough to be a wide receiver 4 or a low-end wide receiver 3. Now, Chris Olave rounds us out at 40. This quarterback situation is disgusting. I mean, Spencer Rattler is a starting quarterback. Olave didn't look good in the preseason. I think that there's other guys I could have put here. Like, you may be asking me, where's Stephon Diggs? It was actually between him and Stephon Diggs. I just don't think the Diggs fit in New England is going to work out long term. I think Vrabel is already kind of tired of him, and I think he could get sick of him, and it might be a Deontay Johnson situation where they trade him or cut him mid-season. So that's why I put Olave here, because I think he just has a richer full season than Stephon Diggs does, but I am not big on Olave. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below, and if you want to see who you should be buying before Week 1 fantasy football, click on this video right here.